What's his interest? Okay, it's 4 o'clock. We will begin the Port Commission meeting for April 20th. I'd like to close the executive session and open the public meeting and call attendance. Commissioner Shepard.
Hi there, I'm here.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Yes, here.
Commissioner Bell. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 20th Commission meeting, Port of Bellingham. Remind everybody that we are still in a public health emergency, and welcome to our Zoom meeting, since there's COVID distancing in the hall. Shall we start with public comment? Anybody wishing to speak before this commission has the time to do so. I'd like you to limit your comments to a few minutes. We've got 15 minutes total for this segment, so anybody wishing to speak, please do so now. Can you raise your hand and I will call on you?
It's like Rose Lathrop.
Rose?
Hello, Commission. My name is Rose Lathrop. I work with Sustainable Connections and am the director for the Community Energy Challenge. I'm here today to ask for your support for the contract between the Port of Bellingham and the USDA. That's a collaborative grant that we wrote with Port of Bellingham staff so that we could help support more businesses in rural Whatcom County with energy efficiency upgrades. The Community Energy Challenge, as many of you probably already know, works with our local business community to help them through an energy audit process and project management. And then we also provide cash incentives to help energy efficiency projects happen. In the last 2 years ago, we did a similar partnership with Opelco, Orcus Power and Light Company. We ended up having really incredible results working with over 48 different businesses offering audits, and completed 48 different projects, including 16 projects that applied for USDA grants for 25% off their energy efficiency and renewable projects. We're really excited about the opportunity to bring this forward in Whatcom County, so please approve our grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Rose, for your efforts.
Yeah, it's appreciated. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Just raise your hand or indicate it. We have nobody here wishing to speak. Guess not. All right, so we'll commence with the meeting. I'd like to start out by announcing the advisory committee meetings. The Marine Advisory Committee, the MAC, will be meeting on May 11th at 6 p.m. via Zoom. And then the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee will be meeting July 15th at 4 p.m. also via Zoom. So the MAC on the 11th and the BIAC on the 15th, all via Zoom. If you can go to our website and find instructions as to how to tune in there. Now, hearing nothing more on that, let's go to our consent agenda. Carrie.
Sure. Motion to approve consent agenda items A through Q.
Commissioner Shepard, did you have any modifications?
I just have a couple questions. So my first was for C, for that write down. And the experience with the Sea Farms International ship that ran up a bill, didn't pay it, and then left town without paying their bill. I guess we're glad we didn't have to take added expense to destroy or deal with the vessel in any other way. But I'm wondering, is there any way that we help prevent this happening to a neighboring port of this vessel coming in and doing the same thing? Is there any liens or anything else we can attach so that other ports hopefully won't have the same experience we have? Yeah, Commissioner, we do share that information. In fact, our harbor master notified me today that Port of Seattle shared with him a customer that was delinquent to some $30,000, and that customer has come up here to Bellingham. So we're not going to be taking them into our harbor. We'll do something similar with ports. We typically notify Anacortes and Skagit, but it's not unheard of for all the kind of northern ports to get together and share these types of lists.
Okay, very good. Well, that just struck me as something that we should be following up on, because it's a considerable amount of money for a port our size whenever that happens, and we want to prevent that in the future.
And if we know who the owner is, do we have any recourse?
I'm sure our attorney's on here and they can talk about any personal liability. I don't believe they have some. In our harbors, we don't typically get any kind of performance bond like we would in our real estate portfolio. So that's why we're a little bit more exposed in the harbors. The numbers are quite a bit less though, and it'd be hard, I think, for most of the boaters to get that type of bond.
Well, this was a third-party transaction anyway, right? So we'd be an arm's length away anyway.
That's correct on all counts. Commissioner Rob is actually right. All right.
Once in a while.
No, you are.
All right. My other comments were just to congratulate and thank those individuals who are going to be serving on our boards, both new appointments on the MAC and the BIAC. And then for letter Q, I just had a question about, we seem to be getting a really fantastic deal on this and are being helped to make this happen by the organization that initially provided the funding and did the deal. So it all seems like a very good asset for us to bring up here. My question is just about the costs that we will have to incur for transport if there's any repairs that we expect to have to take on and then reassembly. And what are our prospects, if any, for finding resources to help pay for that?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's Chris Clark, Business Development Manager, if I can speak to that point. The costs will bring the crane to the Bellingham Shipping Terminal and take it off the barge and put it adjacent to the warehouse number 2. Once it's up here, then there'll be additional costs involved in commissioning the crane. We estimate that they'll probably be between $200,000 and $250,000. Our intention is to do the following. Firstly, to apply to the Maritime Administration for a grant to do these repairs. It's more than likely that we'll be designated as a stop on the Marine Highway. And once that happens, which I've been told our application is on the Secretary's desk, that being the Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Buttigieg, So I think our chances are excellent that that's going to occur. So assuming that that happens, we can make application in a couple of months for those repairs under the program for marine highway equipment and repairs. Additionally, it's important to remember that at this point, ABC Recycling has now 4 stevedoring contractors that are interested in their business. So this is a subject that we can certainly bring up with those entities, and it's ABC's choice as to who they want to employ, but this will be a factor also in their decision as far as who's going to be doing that work, because that stevedore contractor will be using the crane and paying the port, but also will want that crane to be brought to a spec that they can that's most viable for the recycled metal cargoes.
I'm a big fan of this transaction. First of all, I know the value of that piece of equipment, and we're getting it for a song. And it's an amazing tool. So I see a lot of future in that piece of equipment on our port, bringing a lot of work. Plus, I'd like to play on it from time to time if I could get permission.
Well, you better talk to Mr. Schmidt about that. He's trying to get in on the meeting, and he may have something to say to you about that, Commissioner. But no, all kidding aside, certainly you'd be welcome to.
I'm not allowed to touch certain pieces of heavy equipment.
Well, you got to be careful, because when we bought the reach stacker, I made a deal with Darren Williams that I got to be the first one to operate it with it. And he said, yeah, come on down, bring your truck. That's what you're lifting. So.
Yeah, I've broken too many things with pieces of equipment like that, so I've been banned. All right, anything else, Commissioner Shepard?
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. That's it for me.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo Commissioner Shepard's welcoming to the new participants on the MAC, or on both committees, not just MAC and the BIAC. And I think this crane is going to be a great asset to the Port of Bellingham and our shipping terminal over there. It's kind of like that movie, Build It and They Will Come. Well, that's what we've done. We put our commissioners put the shipping terminal back together. We need the tools to work with, and I think this is a great deal. And I think it's going to bring business. So one of the many things that will help. Other than that, I'd just like to point out to all the folks that attend via Zoom here that there's a pretty big consent agenda, and sometimes folks think we just kind of pass things without looking at them, but I'd like to assure you that this commissioner, as well as my fellow commissioners I know, have spoken in the last several days to staff about particular items on the agenda. So this comes before us, and we pass it fairly quickly, I should say, because we've done our homework behind the scenes. So that's all I have to say, and no further questions on the consent agenda.
All right, and it's my turn. Oh, by the way, on pieces of equipment like that, it's a common practice for me to name them. So we'll be holding a Name That Crane contest later. And then, commissioners, if you would indulge me, I'm going to pull item J, which is the Aliati lease, just because I've got a couple of concerns with a bit of the wording in that agreement. To Bobby's point, we actually do read this stuff. But it revolves around a couple of words, and I'd like to pull that and then go ahead with the full consent agenda and then bring that one back for consideration, if that's okay.
So Carrie, we'll add that as action item number 5 instead of on the consent agenda. So
Is that okay with you two?
That's okay with me.
Commissioner Briscoe?
That's okay with me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Consent?
Sure. So motion to approve consent agenda items A through I and K through Q.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is a yes, unanimous. Okay, with that, we'll move on from the consent agenda. I've got to get my agenda back up here, guys. To action item A. I'm on the wrong page. Presentations.
Presentations first.
Tamara, you're up, Q1 financial update.
Oh, I knew forgot that for a reason.
Oh, thanks, Commissioners. Tamara Sobjak, CFO, Port of Bellingham. Let me just share my screen here.
Joke, come on, we got a joke
Come on,
today?
long time no see, Tamara.
Yeah, I know.
You've
it's
avoided us for way too long.
way too long. I do have a joke, but this is a big agenda, so I will tell it at the end of the meeting for those of us who stick around. How about that? You'll want to
Okay.
stick around for it too. All right, so is everybody, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we've got the first quarter 2021 financial results, as well as a few statistics to go through. And I thought we'd just jump right into the financial part of it. My buttons will work. Looking at the 2021 revenues for the first quarter came in at 7.7 million compared to last year this time of 8.2 million. And I think what's surprising to me is we're comparing, as I was going through this, comparing a non-pandemic quarter to a pandemic quarter. And I think we fared fairly well. I think 6 months ago, I would have not expected revenues to be where they are. So I'll dive in a little bit in more detail. Same time period, expenses, we're still doing all the business of the port. And so we do expect, costs to go up year over year with inflation. We came in at 8.8 million compared to 8.5 last year. So very, expected. Looking at the airport, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We know that they've been impacted the most at the ports. In the fall, when we did the 2021 budget, we were in the pandemic, and so we budgeted appropriately. Revenues have come in about a little lower than we expected, but pretty much where we expected. Same with the expenses. But the good news is the federal government came through in a big way, and I know you know this because you just approved it. We received a second round of relief funding of $2.7 million. So if I add that to the airport's revenues, we're back up to pre-pandemic level last year. So I like to put positive spins on things, and so I wanted to add this to that column.
Before you move on, sorry, can we just point out just a big kudos to our airport team, because while those federal monies came in and covered the expenses, when you compare the green to the blue, we drastically cut our expenses compared to last year. So the airport financially is going to be okay, thanks to the good work of the airport crew.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's a great point. Moving on to the marinas, this is also a good news slide. Normally, I would see the revenues and expenses really similar to what we budget, but the revenues have come in a little bit higher, and for a couple of reasons. There was a small rate increase in the pleasure moorage implemented in April of 2020, so that accounts for a small amount. But both harbors are reporting increased occupancy. So people are starting to bring their boats back. The Squalicum Harbor has been pretty full most of the time, but staff got pretty creative and started maximizing the winter use of those vacant commercial slips for shorter term pleasure boats. So that really helped their revenues. And then also, Kyle reports that staff has been playing a little bit of a shell game. So when there's some short-term vacancies in the pleasure slips, he can fill those or play a little shell game, move boats around, and really, really maximize all of those slips. So they've been pretty creative, and it's showing on their financials. The shipping terminal, we haven't seen a lot of activity, but I mean, we just talked about this asset is really being marketed heavily and set up for success. So while revenues haven't really jumped, we're on the cusp, I believe. And then also the expenses for the shipping terminal are heavily related to the activity. So if the activity doesn't come in, we don't get the revenues, we don't see the expenses. So that's what we're seeing there too. The cruise terminal, the revenues and expenses are very predictable here. I don't have anything to report. As long as the ferry remains predictable, The financials of the cruise terminal remain predictable. Net income's a little bit better than we expected, and that's due to just cost saving and being very aware of what we're spending and what we need to spend. The real estate division, the revenues normally go right budget to budget. I mean, you can just draw a straight line across. It's a little different for first quarter, and that's because of the restaurant relief package that the commission offered. So we see a little dip in that, but as our restaurants reopen and people get back to normal, I think this will go right back to where we expect it. All of that leads to our balance sheet. We have total assets of over $400 million and liabilities of just over $135 million, leaving us net assets, or if we were a private company, we'd say net worth of $268 million. And you can see compared to 3 months ago, that's about $1 million lower, and that's just net income. So as we recover that net income, that number will go back up. I'm required to report to the commission investments every quarter. We have $7 million in federal securities. That is lower than I normally like to keep it. And that's because the interest rates are so low, and these federal securities are, 1 to 5 years. And so to invest in a 5-year security at 0.5% doesn't seem right. But I expect that with the LGIP balance or the rate being so low, I need to start investing more in these federal securities in maybe 1 to 2 years. So next quarter, I would expect more invested a little bit longer term. And then this risk management activities, we have 2 open claims for the port. One is that August 27 damage that was done. Final estimate is expected by the end of this month, and our port's property insurance carrier is handling that. And then the other one, the 2020 COVID-19 loss of income, there was a tiny little piece of our policy that allowed for $50,000 in lost income to be claimed. And we put in our claim. It's a little bit complicated because everybody's putting in their claim. So we're waiting for the determination from the carrier on that little piece. And then we have 1 open claim against the port. That's that slip and fall in Blaine in January of 2018. And that's being handled by legal and our insurance companies. And then Stormwater program, another good news slide. Both airport and shipping terminal are in compliance with training and record keeping, and the results were within limits for both locations, no exceptions. And I don't think I've said this in several quarters, so great news there. Safety report, we've had 0 injuries this year. We had 1 last year, so that trend is still going down. Nothing to say here except for, the safety committee does a really good job of making sure that we're all educated and aware, and they do their safety audits and walk around and make sure that we're staying safe. And you can see the results of their efforts here. And then finally, public records requests. We've received only 26 this year so far. It's taken 64 hours to respond to those requests. So looks like we're on track to end up in 2020. Things remain the same. So any questions, comments, anything you'd like to know more about, less about?
I'd like to make a comment if I could. So an overall comment, very, very good job at showing us what's going on with the port and our financials and everything we've done. Secondly, I'd like to say that through this pandemic, this country's been upside down, sideways, inside out, twisted all around. And I'd like to thank our staff and our executive director for the example they have set through this mess. We've held steadfast to our course. We kept our people employed. We've kept our business moving, and we've helped everyone we could help to our extent that we could help. So thank you to staff and my executive director. That's all I have.
Commissioner Shepard?
I don't have any other comments, but I'm very pleased to see that we've come out of this better than expected in a lot of categories here. So it gives me a lot of hope that as we're moving into a lot more robust recovery, that we're going to continue seeing those good news slides, as Tamara puts it. So thanks.
Couple of questions. You went through the expenses in like the second slide, and I'm just wondering, because the expenses did go up, how much of that was COVID related? I mean, can you tie directly, did we spend a couple $100,000 on COVID related supplies, materials?
We did, but we recovered that. The county passed through some of their relief funding and paid for that for us. And that was last year, not this year.
So the one thing that hasn't been covered is the ferry from December on. So the county, or the federal government actually gave the county money, and then they paid us for the ferry from August through November. However, we have not been reimbursed from December forward. The county will be getting another tranche of money, and I fully suspect we will get reimbursed for the ferry out of that. But those conversations are ongoing.
And then the last question is just technical. You said you were going to put some more money into some of those bonds, and I'm just wondering how much of our liquidity do we keep in those kinds of bonds? Do we have a set number? Do we have a set percentage?
No, normally I like to keep, I look at a couple of things. One, our required reserve. So we're not going to use that money. I like to invest that a little bit longer, a little bit higher interest rate, because I know we don't need it. And secondly, we received a pretty large insurance settlement for some environmental cleanup. So I need to get with Brian and see when he expects to use that money. And if it's a little bit ways out, then I'd like to invest some of that as well. So it's just kind of looking at our cash needs.
So, Commissioner, the biggest unpredictable thing we deal with is permitting. And it's not just the local level, it's the federal level as well. And that's what holds up the big projects. And we tend to save a lot of liquidity thinking we're going to get a project done, and then all of a sudden we're held up from it, and the money sat there in a liquid state and didn't earn us much interest. And that's the challenge we're trying to balance all the time is, you know, how fast are we really going to be able to do this project, and how far out can we really invest this money?
Well, it's one of the questions that I constantly try to wrestle with, and that is how much do we put in projects that are going to do a better return than just putting it in a CD or in a bond, and especially in this economy. You know, we've got a booming economy, and I know the flip side to that is it could turn it on a dime, but it's just a lot of money.
Well, we want to do as many projects as we can, and we want to put the money to work. That's absolutely the goal here. But wanting to and realistically being able to do so are really two different things based on the permitting environment and the regulatory environment we live in. You've seen what all agencies have to be involved every time we do something in the water, and that uncertainty really hurts us when it comes to investing our money.
Fair enough. All right, thanks. Tamara, that was amazing. Thank you.
Wait till you hear my joke.
Oh, go. Oh, we got to wait till the end of the meeting?
Yep, you got to stick around.
You know, if you told it now, you could leave.
That's not true.
All right, thank you, Tamara. Now the Waterfront District update.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental and Planning Services and the Waterfront District Project Manager here. Let me see if I can share my screen as well. All right, is that coming through okay? It looks like I can see it up on the screen there too. Okay, good. So yeah, so I have a brief update on the Waterfront District for you tonight. You know, this is one that if you've noticed over the past year or so, we've transitioned a bit on these Waterfront District updates from kind of the much more broad updates that we were doing when we were doing the sub-area plan amendment, because that kind of touched all different parts of the waterfront. And we've kind of transitioned into these more project specific or geographic specific updates, just to keep the commission informed on what staff's working on. For example, you know, a few meetings back, we did an update on the marine trades cleanup and redevelopment project that includes the ASB, We've had a couple other project updates from Harcourt on some of the things they've been working on. And so we're kind of transitioning into these more specific updates. And this one, what we wanted to talk about today is kind of the fun stuff we've been working on. We've been working on ways to activate the downtown waterfront using interim uses while the final development projects come together. So, you know, this builds upon the 2021 budget objective of promoting interim uses in the downtown waterfront, including public access, community events, and activities for all ages, including things like temporary art facilities and that kind of thing. You know, one of the key things, an example of that has been is when we built the bike park or the pump track, and that was an immediate success when that came online. It's been a really great community asset that people have used of all ages, and that surprisingly has been a really great asset during COVID. You know, it's an activity that people can do that's in town, it's outside. Once we kind of got through that initial phase of COVID when nobody knew what was safe to do, we reopened the pump track, and it's been actively used ever since. And I've heard recently examples like there've been like pump track birthday parties are a big thing, because that's just something that kids can go do with their friends that they can't do. They go to a movie or something like that, and so we've got picnic tables out there, and they can have a picnic and have a little bit of some kind of a normal birthday party and that sort of thing. So we want to continue to build on those opportunities, and we've been working on this for a number for most of this year to expand those opportunities. And we've got a really great interim uses project team that consists of Port staff. We're trying to do majority of these efforts in-house because we recognize that these are most likely temporary facilities that we want to have cost-effective, limit the outside consulting work if we can, and try to keep them moving forward. But they're also very diverse, as you'll see. There's everything from pump tracks to restrooms, a variety of different things that we're looking at. So we've got a group that includes, you know, engineering, maintenance, the executive team, the waterfront team, community events participate in the planning of these because there's overlap there. So it's been a really great effort from this team, and big thanks to everybody who's been working on it. So I'm going to walk through a few things that on what we're working on, and we'll go from there. So one of the first things is an expansion of the bike park to include a skills area that is actually under construction right now. On this figure, it's kind of underway right in here, next to the existing pump track. It'll expand some areas for beginners to use to get better skills, and just kind of expand our opportunities to provide different types of facilities for different types of skills. The next one that I was going to show here, I'm going to come back to this slide a number of times, just so you know. And I don't expect you to look at all the details here, but I'm going to kind of highlight a couple things. One is there's a lot going on here. This is a significant area of property. It's about a little less than 20 acres, I think. There's already some existing components, this is the bike track. This is Granary Avenue and Laurel, Waypoint Park here, and the Granary building here. So there's a lot of different moving parts that we're trying to facilitate, and we're constantly readjusting. These are just ideas at this point, some of them, and we're going to try to move them around as we can. So I'll keep coming back to this layout with some of the example projects that we're working on and highlight them in a little more detail. So one of the first ones is the public restrooms and open space that we're working on. We actually, one of the first things we noticed with the popularity of the pump track was that there's a lot of kids and parents that need to have restrooms that are nearby. We have been operating porta potty restrooms, but that's really not something that can be sustained in the long term. So we recognized pretty early that we wanted to try to install something that's much more permanent, that has running water and is more enclosed. So we actually have installed the utilities off of Laurel Street to provide sewer and water and power. And now we're underway with the fabrication of a kind of semi-permanent restroom facility. That one is actually currently underway. The utilities are installed. The issue we've run into is that that there's for a prefabbed facility like that, there is some state inspections that have to occur, And the state agencies have been a little bit more slow to react to COVID restrictions. So we are now currently slated for our inspection and having fabrication underway. So that's great news, and we're hoping to have them installed and operational by the end of May. So that's great news. In addition to that, the other thing that we have already constructed is this public open space and grass lawn that's in this kind of green polygon shape. Is constructed, hydroseeded, and currently fenced off while the grass gets established. Luckily, we've had really great grass growing weather, and that's starting to really pop. We did notice that there's been some settling. It was some of the work was done when it was still pretty wet, so we'll probably have to come in and do a little small repairs. But we're hoping to have that opened up as soon as the grass gets established as well. So you can have a variety of different uses down there, including the pump track, and people just want to come and kind of hang out. Another one on this one, just to highlight, is that we're continuing to build on those utilities that we are putting in for the restrooms, and are now looking at a container village and food trucks that can be established in and around those same utilities. So we are working with some local vendors to have a variety of different types of uses that could come down there: ice cream, coffee, a beer garden, also then for food truck pedestals for people that can come and go. Have a little less of a temporary setup, but also some more permanent settings in containers. So we're underway with some permitting on those containers right now, and we're really excited to have that be a really unique feeling for different types of uses for people to come down and get some refreshments and hang out with their kids at the pump track, or just there are people down there all the time right now, and it's a really great opportunity. Another one that's really exciting is that the Bellingham Farmers Market has announced that they are going to have their summer Wednesday markets on the waterfront. It's in an existing area of pavement. It's kind of in an as is condition. They can come down there. Vendors, a variety of different vendors can set up. Very little additional work has to be done to accommodate their use, and they're really excited to have that facility. That will also build on those other existing uses. People that will be able to come down, hang out at the park, at the pump track, at the new lawn. There'll be restrooms available, and it really will start to really feel like a district that has some cohesiveness. So they're hoping to start that in June and run through September, and those will typically be from 4 to 7 on Wednesdays. And that one, just to show it on the map, coming back, that same map is up here at the corner of the intersection of Laurel and Granary Avenue, and that's already a paved area that they can just come and the vendors can set up and utilize it as is. This is one that was kind of unexpected, but really could be a really cool community asset. We had a donation. This was made possible through a donation from Peter Paulson, who has a long-standing relationship with the port, and was very generous to help facilitate some kind of public access component. And we came up with the idea of a kind of a semi-mobile stage that would be able to be used for public use at any time, or also be tied to public events that could be utilized down there. It's in an area that I'll show it on the map. It's on the lawn, kind of situated right in front of the digesters there in a very prominent location. And it could be really, really fun and easy public access.
All right, we may have lost Brian here. The stage is going to be a great feature, and we're talking about a number of events that want to utilize it this summer. I think the location is going to pivot a little more towards the middle of the grass area and kind of the middle of the digesters. If you envision 6 digester buildings, this should be right in between the middle 2 of them. So we're looking forward to getting this project done. Now, what I can't do is advance the slide. Give me just a minute here. Which one? Oh, that's not it. Oh, clever. We'll click through until we get it. That's financial. Ah.
Hey, we can get Carrie to tell a joke.
Hey, Tamara, where's your joke?
Okay, Tamara, here's your shot. You've got empty space to fill.
Okay, do you really want it real quick?
Sure.
Oh, Brian's back.
Oh,
Oh, you got lucky.
Am I back?
You're back.
Yeah, I don't know. I pushed advance and then everything shut down on my computer. So apologies for that. Let's see here if I can keep going. I'm almost done on this on these slides, so I was just about wrapped up. Okay, if I
We got it.
know where I was at, I think I was just wrapping up, kind of talking about the Peter Paulson waterfront stage.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The location of that is kind of right here, shown just kind of sandwiched between the digesters and the lawn. So those are the main things we have working on right now. But there's a few other items that we are continuing to work on that are a little bit further down the line, but that are on our radar. One is that we're also working with a community group looking to design kind of a public access bench that we can also be mobile, that we can move around, that have some planters, kind of those little parklets that you see around town, something like that could be really great, that could be even built by community members. We also, some of the kind of more maintenance level of things on the tile tanks here. You may have noticed that there's a number of those tiles that are starting to come off. There's some significant maintenance that we need to do on that. We're working to partner with the city on those costs associated with that, since that will likely be a long-term park element. Some other items that we're working on, and working also in partnership with the city, is a potential skate park to occupy underneath the Chestnut Bridge. There's some kind of maintenance work that we need to do, and also want to make sure we're doing that in partnership with the city. And then the other one is shown here is an interim parking lot across the street from the granary for some of the larger tenants that are planned to go into the granary building here shortly. So we've committed to the Harcourt to work with them on providing interim parking, surface parking, until the demand gets to the point where we do things like structured parking and that sort of thing. And then lastly, like I said, our community events group is working with a number of ideas for events down there, all of that pending COVID, of course, but we're trying to provide facilities that once that runs its course and we can reopen the site for larger events, that will also be able to facilitate those types of ideas. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions you have. Yeah.
Quick question on the digester tanks. Do we know, Rob and I were recently down there, and I was just noticing the paint peeling, and it made me question if we know the condition of that paint, if it's lead-based or anything we have to worry about in terms of keeping track of and increased level of community presence down there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, that's also one that's on our radar. And I probably should have added to that, to the maintenance type of thing. You know, it's currently fenced off. So we do, but we would like to potentially open that up so people could, like the waypoint, the acid ball, people could get up close to those. But before we do that, we definitely want to do some regulated building materials assessments to see what it is. The acid ball did have some lead-based paint on it. So it was same generation, would assume that could be the case. So we've got some work to do to make sure we can, address that appropriately. But the fencing is designed to keep folks away from those for that partly for that purpose.
Okay.
I can't look at this and not think about the time when we're actually going to do something on that waterfront that's not pump track related. Do you understand that there are going to be thousands of teenagers and their parents on Port Commissioner's doorsteps when you remove this track? And do we have a backup plan for where it's going to go?
Rob's house.
Yeah, let's build it in my house.
Seriously.
Commissioners, I don't think it's going to go away. I mean, we designed this in the footprint of a city park, so ultimately it'd be the city that has that decision. But my expectation is that maybe it gets skinnied down some to fit better in with other park users, but that some element of this always remains. And keep in mind that the end of Cornwall is designated to be all park as well, so maybe it moves down there. If it, you know, it's all up in the air right now, but I suspect based on the popularity of the pump track, that there's going to be one around in the downtown area for years to come.
If it does go away, we can blame it on the city. That's all I care about.
Sure, sure.
Rob and I were down there last week, and unsolicited, a mom came up with her 5-year-old and just started talking to me about it and said, my 5-year-old, he was hesitant to bike, didn't have the confidence to really get on a bike and do much, but he came to the pump track. He got his all the confidence he needed, and now he's on Galbraith riding around. And so,
that's
you
a
know,
great story.
those are the stories we hear of. It's really been transformational for a lot of people in our community, and it has a huge following, and it's really just been great to watch in process.
Commissioner Shepard's own son falls in that camp as well. I watched him ride the pump track for the first time, and while it was still being built, and he was very timid. And now I watch him out there, and the kid's a maniac. So it must come from his mom's side of the family, huh?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we've seen the success in our own family too.
Well,
But
I think it's more of an acknowledgement of what a great idea it was to put that down there in the first place, and it's going to be hard to see it go away if it ever does. So we're thankful for it.
And make sure that that Rob, Director Fix, is the one that this was his idea. This was his dream,
No question.
so to speak, and all kudos to him for coming up with it.
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioners, but it wasn't just me. It was a team. Eric Brown with the WMBC, the local mountain bike club, Mike Hogan, Greg Nickel from our team. I mean, this was very much a team effort. It just wasn't me.
yeah. Well, it's part of a big piece that, I mean, all of these projects, Brian, that you listed, these are really being run in-house by our team to get off the ground a really diverse range of community benefits. And I know people appreciate it. And I know it's been a lot of work for our team, and it's a lot of kind of diverse, different things to be doing. But it's taken that idea of interim use that I remember you coming back from Copenhagen with the team of hearing loud and clear that this was a good idea in practice, and that we should see it into fruition. And it's really occurred, and it keeps having new dimensions that we didn't initially anticipate. And I do want to second what Bobby said of our Executive Director Fix has really done a great job with the rest of the team in seeing these projects into reality.
Anything else on the waterfront?
Well, one thing I was wondering when we're going to be building Rob's office that overlooks the pump track. When are we going to put that together?
I figure out how to get down there once a week for a phone call.
The reception's better there?
The wind in the background, that's where I am.
I think he's going to retrofit one of those tanks. All right, ready to move
Right,
to the
thanks, Commissioners.
port security budget update for Scott.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Scott McCreary, Emergency Management and Security Officer with the Port of Bellingham. At last month's meeting, you approved a one-year extension of our security contractor's budget, security contract, I should say. But at that time, you asked that emergency services evaluate the adequacy of our existing budget to be able to address contracted security services that could be associated with potential increases in the incidence of homeless encampments on port properties. Emergency services met with our representatives from all of the operating divisions here at the port to assess the homeless encampment establishment within their operational areas. What we identified was that smaller one-off transient camps can be managed very effectively under the current scope of our contract as well as the associated budget. And it's those types of one-off incidents that are what the port typically sees. But larger encampments similar to what we saw at the former Ligon warehouse parking lot, which require additional security services above and beyond the kind of baseline of our contract. We assessed that those are really limited to some specific areas on port property. And that's a function of available open area for a larger encampment, and also the frequency with which there are either port personnel or our contract security personnel moving through that area, such that they would be able to identify and quickly interdict any kind of encampment before it gets established. There were 2 areas that were identified with the potential for this. They were real estate areas down in the Fairhaven area, and also the BWAS property. So looking more closely at that with our real estate representatives and with Brian and his team, we looked at the contracts and budget that we have for contracted security for those areas, and both of those groups identified that they feel that the existing budgets can absorb the potential impact of larger encampments, particularly when they're managing to their bottom line as opposed to just managing to the security budget line item. So in response to your request, we've done that evaluation and do not feel that there's a need at this time to request additional budget to address what we perceive to be the risk of homeless encampments on port property.
We may do the same evaluation for moving the pump track down the road, so keep that in the back of your head.
We can do that.
Question
Thank
for
you, Scott.
Say, the FMIP places, and for people that are doing some Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park, I spent a year there putting the boat together this last year through the pandemic. There all night long and in and out late and early in the morning. Do we have a patrol over there? Because I never ever saw one.
I need to take a look and see what the patrol route is through there, Commissioner. So unfortunately, I can't tell you with surety one way or the other what the patrol schedule is within the FMIP property.
Yeah, if you could, if we have one, I did see one. And the other thing is I'm assuming that's one of the properties you were referring to as yeah, because there is a serious issue back behind the old building there. I personally ran a few folks out of there with their campers and their other stuff that were kind of maybe doing what they should have been doing. But I'd like to know if we have a patrol that goes through there or not, because our businesses there have been having some issues.
I'll run that to ground and get back with you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I will add that under action item number 2, we're going to talk about security gates in Squalicum Harbor, but Greg Nichols is also going to give you a quick update on the Fairhaven gates.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to action items.
Okay. A motion authorizing the executive director to enter into a grant agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture for funding for the Whatcom County Rural Energy Audit Program and to execute associated documents with project partners to implement the grant scope of work.
Adrian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian Hedgedis. I'm an environmental specialist with the Port of Bellingham. It's very nice to bring some more good news to you today. Our application for a $100,000 grant from the USDA was approved. So I'm bringing that to you for approval for Rob to sign. This won't change the port's budget at all. So 100% of the port's costs will be covered by this grant. This program that the grant is through is called the Rural Energy for America program. The port, I do have some slides here. Sorry, let me share those. I spoke too soon. Okay, can you see the slides there?
Yes.
Maybe not too many of them. There we go. Okay. So I find this hard to say, honestly, the Rural Energy for America program. And we officially we are calling this, it's actually the Whatcom County Rural Energy Audit Program. We've shortened that to Energize Whatcom because it's a whole lot easier to remember and to say. So we are partnering with Sustainable Connections, Whatcom Conservation District, and Spark Northwest as well. We also have support from Whatcom County as well. And the focus of this work will be to audit and provide education to small businesses throughout the county, as well as agricultural businesses within Bellingham itself. So it's really, it is a good thing, a win-win all around. And I guess I leave that for questions from any of you at this point.
Adrian,
Thanks,
I've actually been through one of these, so I understand what they do. Can you just briefly explain what types of things the energy audit would go through and recommendations that would be made?
Yeah, so it might be going through a building and seeing if they could look at various types of weatherization of the building, whether it's, comes down to weather stripping your windows or replacing the windows, looking at different insulation and sort of where those leaks might be in the building itself, whether there's other energy efficiency opportunities through the business processes, whatever those business activities are, whether there might be an opportunity there. Looking at similar businesses or a typical business energy footprint for that type of business and comparing it to those businesses as well. Yeah, you name it.
And lighting and
yes,
and heating,
definitely.
all of the above.
Yep.
So increase efficiency in bulbs, which was one of my biggies. Yep.
How do they choose who they look at? Who makes the choice of where they go and look?
Well, so we will be not forcing it on anyone. We'll be providing outreach through with help from Whatcom Conservation District, and Sustainable Connections as well has quite a lot of connections in the county. So we will be, it's a little different with COVID. I know if Rose is still on here, she has said in the past that like with Opalco, they were able to meet with people in coffee shops and go through opportunities and then have people sign on for those audits. So with COVID, things might look a little different, but we will be kicking off next week and we will be talking about our outreach opportunities then.
So this will work well for our smaller businesses and our communities that may need some help.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Adrian and Rose, for what you've done here.
You're very welcome.
Share real quick. We had this done on our home as part of the Bellingham Energy Challenge, and we have a leaky old 126-year-old home, and it really made a huge difference in not just the amount of money we were paying, but just how comfortable it is to be in the winter for its just feel of warmth and enjoyment. So I'm glad this opportunity is going to be available to people in the rest of Whatcom County, and hope we can especially get some of our agricultural sector to participate as well. Anytime they're able to save money, they can spend more money doing what they do best. So I'm certainly in favor of seeing that particular outreach be addressed.
Any other comments? Carrie, would you mind?
A motion authorizing the executive director to enter into a grant agreement with the United States Department of Agriculture for funding for the Whatcom County Rural Energy Audit Program and to execute associated documents with project partners to implement the grant scope of work.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bellizzi, yes. Unanimous. On to action item 2.
Okay, appropriate funds to a new 2021 project to install security gates at Squalicum Harbor.
Greg?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. Dog upstairs, I apologize for that. As Rob mentioned earlier, not only am I going to be presenting on this particular action item, which is to allocate funding for a new project to install security gates at Squalicum Harbor, but I'll also be providing a brief update on where we're at with the security gates to be installed at Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. The Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park gates are funded by a 2021 capital improvement project. To begin, hopefully everybody can see my screen. The proposed project at Squalicum Harbor will install 2 security gates on North Harbor Loop Drive and South Harbor Loop Drive. The intent is to control vehicle access into the area that I have shaded in gray. This area accesses web houses 1 through 5. Harbor gates 5 through 7, and Zwanich Park and the Zwanich Park Boathouse. And this fall it will also include the Fisherman's Pavilion. Just to go into a little bit of detail on each gate, if I can get my slides to advance.
Greg, while you're changing slides, I just want to add for folks that these gates will only be locked during off-business hours. So we haven't determined exactly what those hours are, but I can imagine, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. type of thing. Our security guards will close them and open them, but they will be open during normal business hours or the daytime.
Thank you for that clarification. So the gate that will be installed at North Harbor Loop Drive will be is currently proposed to be installed adjacent to the patio area at the Web Locker restaurant. This would be an automatic double arm gate, and it would be operated by the key fob system that is currently in place for access to our marina gates. The key fobs will be installed both on the ingress and egress, and they'll be installed in islands in the middle of North Harbor Loop Drive. As Rob mentioned, these gates would only be closed during specific hours. We would, not only would we have key fob access, but we would also have keypad access to address the potential for folks attending events at the Boathouse and the Fisherman's Pavilion to have egress. So we have options to address all of that. Moving on to South Harbor Loop, the gate there is quite simple. It's a manual, what they call a forestry style gate. Envision basically a bar across the road. What we're currently proposing is a 30-foot long single forestry style gate that would swing to the west side of the road. And this gate would be installed just to the south of the entrance to the Sawtooth Pier, so that there would be unrestricted access to the Sawtooth Pier. Moving on to the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park gates. As I mentioned, this is a fully funded project. This project would install chain link cantilevered automatic rolling gates at the 2 entrances to the site. One to the south next to the Paddon Lagoon, and one to the, to the west, and one to the east further up Harris Avenue. As I mentioned, it'll be a chain link cantilevered rolling gate. The advantage of a cantilevered rolling gate is you don't have a track, so that you won't have a bump to drive over. As you can see in this figure, we would install a fence along the Paddon Lagoon, and then the gate would extend across, and similar on the east side. Currently, we're looking at options to provide solar power to control these, to avoid having to trench new power supply to these 2 gates. That's currently being evaluated. If we can't do that, we would have to extend power from this transformer that's located along Harris Avenue and extend power to the 2 gates. One nuance of this project that we're currently working on is that this drive lane on the west side actually includes some City of Bellingham land because the Padden Lagoon was deeded to the city at some point in history. And so we'll actually have to get a easement from the city in order to install this western gate. We're currently working on that. We're not certain on the timeline. But speaking of timeline, the intent is to build these two projects as a single construction contract, with the plans to bid the project in midsummer with completion in early fall. All of that is predicated on the assumption that we'll be able to get the easement in a fairly timely fashion. We also, because of the proximity to the bay, both projects will require shoreline exemptions, which we don't anticipate being an issue, but that's something that we'll get applied for in the very near future. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Can we go back? Well, we'll deal with what you got up here. Can you back up one slide, Greg? Okay, so not the other one with the FMIP. There you go. So are we putting chain link fence, attaching it to everything that's existing all the way around? Is that the orange line? Is that what we're doing?
I believe we have John Gibson on, who's the project engineer for this. And if he's on, I'm going to ask him to weigh in on that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is John Gibson, project engineer, and I'd be happy to field that question for you. That orange line that you see, that's actually the property boundary. So this is from the City of Bellingham's GIS database.
Okay. So we've got two entrances covered, the third one up the hill. I don't see anything on that one. Up by the old chain, or up by the chain plant up there.
You're talking about building 8 on the back side of the property, Commissioner?
Yeah, up the road there.
I think that currently has a forestry style swing gate, but we can certainly look at putting another style gate in there. I don't think it needs to be automatic. I think it can be something that just manually rolls shut because it's not open very often.
Right. If we could, you could probably even use that frame and attach the chain link to that frame to kind of, I know people are going to be upset about not being able to walk through here, but with the liability problems we've had and the other things, the theft and everything that's going on there, we have to stop traffic through there. It's just not working out. So,
Commissioner, do you think it'd be okay to have that back gate open during the day and closed at night?
Oh, the one up the hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you want. I don't know what you want car traffic coming in and out of there. We could talk about that at another time, though, Rob. But
okay.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I'd have to think about that for a little bit. Maybe talk to the folks that have the businesses right there that are having issues.
Sure, we'll go down and talk to them. Thank you.
Okay, so then back over to Squalicum. Greg, okay, out towards the boat. Yeah. Okay, the restricted vehicle access area. What are we pointing to there?
So
is that just the overall? Is that just the overall area, or is that another gate?
No. So what I'm trying to show here, and I don't think that I hit the mark totally with it, but really I was just referencing this gray shaded area.
Okay, very good.
The shaded area is intended to be the area that would be restricted during the hours that those gates were closed.
Right. No, I was just trying to figure out if we had another gate there, a third one or not. But I understand what you're doing. Very good. Thank you. Can we move the time frame ahead with Squalicum if we don't connect the two together? Because Squalicum was, I think, the more urgent need because of the large theft problem there.
I believe that we probably can. Our design, I think, is fairly well along. The only question mark there is lead time on those gates. We've been encountering a lot of extended lead times as a result of COVID, but regardless, we won't let the FMIP project slow down the Squalicum Harbor project.
I think the tenants there would much appreciate that, Greg. Thank you.
how do these work with emergency access? Do our paramedics and fire, do they have fobs, or do they have a special code, or how does this work?
So if I'm remembering correctly, the fire department has fobs to all of our gates and would have fob access. The other thing that we'll have is something called a Knox box, which is basically just a lockable key box that we give a key to that box to the fire department so that they always have access to our facilities. And we typically do that on any facility where we restrict access.
Okay. It doesn't have controls for off-site, like if somebody called and you wanted to open the gate from your office, does it have that control?
So in talking with harbor staff, this is getting into a little bit of the operations that I'm not necessarily the expert on, but in talking to harbor staff, my understanding is that there is a security guard on staff at all times, and we're going to provide signage with contact information for the security company so that they can exit if they got stuck in there after hours.
Okay. Because some of those, are when you're leaving, they automatically open, but I could see in this case, we don't want to invite somebody to automatically be able to leave if they're stealing things.
Yes, we had a fair amount of discussion over that issue.
Yeah. And then the one by the Sawtooth, so that's just going to be closed then at say 11 p.m. and it's just going to remain closed. There's not a key fob or anything to control that one.
Correct. The access during after hours would be via North Harbor Loop Drive.
Okay, so between this and then the work we've done to secure gates with fob control, are there any other kind of weak points that we haven't done enough work to secure in terms of our gates or other areas that we need to put on our list for next?
Commissioner, we're going to come to you during the budget season with the answers to that question. Right now, we're looking at cameras as being something that might be something we want to shore up in not only the Squalicum area, but other areas of the port. And there may be some key systems that we design for certain buildings that we think are pertinent as well. But that's something that we'll flesh out for the 2022 budget season.
All right, very good. Thank you.
One more thing, clarification, Greg. The manual south gate there, big trucks would be able to access at all hours because we have a security guy. If you got a truck that's too big to get through the other side of a trailer, they could get access via the security guard, correct?
That's correct. And one thing you'll see here is that we have caution signs shown warning that the gate is there. And the intent is to also provide signage for contact to the security guards in the event that they needed after hours access.
All right, very good. Thank you, Greg.
Any more questions?
I have none.
Carrie, action item number 2.
Appropriate funds to a new 2021 project to install security gates at Squalicum Harbor.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is a yes as well. Action item number 3.
Appropriate funds to a new 2021 project to construct the Peter Paulson stage in the Waterfront District.
Greg, you're up again.
I'm back. Greg Nichols, Senior Project Engineer. So Brian Gowan largely stole my thunder on this one, so I'll be brief. But this is a project to construct the Peter Paulson stage in the Waterfront District. As Brian mentioned, this is going to be funded through a very generous donation from Peter Paulson. The stage is, again, as you've seen, the stage is going to be located basically in the center of the 6 digesters adjacent to the grass lawn. The current plan is for this to be a semi-mobile stage. It's going to be 20 foot by 20 foot and approximately 30 inches tall. And it will have Peter Paulson stage presented on the face of it. We're anticipating that it's going to be a timber structure. We're currently discussing with a structural engineer on the exact design of it, but the current vision is that it's actually going to be comprised of 4 10 by 10 sections that can be taken apart with some effort. But if in the event that you needed to relocate this facility because of the planned development that might happen in that area, we can actually disassemble the structure and then move it to another location. We would have to pour new foundations and things like that. But the idea is that we wouldn't have to start from scratch if we have to move this thing. But it's effectively going to be a timber structure with a non-skid deck on it. We already have the skeleton power supply put in place that we put in place when we put in the new power supply to the Waterfront District, which was completed late last year. So we're pretty well set up for good sized concerts on this stage. And I think that's really all the details that I can provide at this time. We are shooting for having this done mid to late summer. One thing that we are cognizant of is that lumber prices and lumber lead times are fairly excessive at the moment. So we're going to have to continue to monitor that as we work through the design. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, I just want to add really quick to that Greg came up with a pretty ingenious plan to use some of our old pilings as the base or the posts for this stage. So we're going to save a little bit on timber there, and the availability is current.
So along those lines, have we looked into composite versus wood? Both for cost and durability for taking apart and moving around?
So for the structure itself, we haven't given a lot of thought to composites, but we absolutely can. As far as the deck itself goes, we've given a lot of thought to the composites, potentially using fiberglass reinforced plastic decking, both for longevity and slip resistance. So that's absolutely something that is at the forefront of our mind, particularly given some of the experience we've had with some of the timber decking in the marine environment.
Yeah, well, it gets wet when slippery and you get a little moss on it. So yeah, no, great, Greg, because the fiberglass decking I think is a great alternative to any kind of timber structure. It's never going to rot. You're never going to have to replace it. It's a lot lighter to move around and way more durable. So great.
Agreed.
Glad to see you're looking ahead on that one. Thanks.
Okay. Gary?
Appropriate funds to a new 2021 project to construct the Peter Paulson Stage in the Waterfront District.
Commissioner Briscoe this time.
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard?
Also yes.
And Commissioner Bell is a yes, unanimous. Action item number 4.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve a modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and Seaview Boatyard North, Inc. for premises at Squalicum Harbor.
Brady?
Yeah, hello, Commissioners. My name is Brady Scott, Senior Property Manager here at the Port. Seaview North is requesting a modification of lease to their Squalicum Boatyard lease area. The major deal points on this transaction include adding a dry stack storage and vessel fueling activities to their authorized use, which would include a tenant construction of a $3 to $3.5 million building. The building would be 60 feet high and approximately 42,000 square feet. 2/3 of the building would be used for dry stack moorage of vessels, up to 28 feet in length, approximately 210 vessels. And then 1/3 of the building would be used for large vessel repairs. Seaview expects this to bring up to 20 jobs to the site. The timeline is for them to submit plans and permits within 9 months. Once permitting is complete, to start construction within 6 months. And then once permitted, to have 12 months for substantial completion of the building, which would be no later than April 2026, depending on permitting timeframe by the city. The lease currently ends in 2042. So this modification of lease would also add 20 years to the term of the lease, extending it out to 2062. And that would be contingent upon successful, excuse me, successful construction of the building. Rent would continue as existing through 2042. And then for the additional 20 years, rent would be renegotiated based on port rent standards every 5 years. And staff recommends approval of this modification of lease.
Love to start with you, Commissioner Briscoe.
No questions.
Commissioner Shepard?
I have been looking forward to getting dry stack storage in our harbor for several years, so I am really pleased to see this coming about. I think there's a need for it, and hopefully it will relieve a little bit of pressure in our harbor and allow us to get more people into slips with our waiting list and having a full harbor. So I'm glad to see that happening. That's all my other questions have already been addressed. Thank you.
And I'm the same way. I've addressed all the questions. Just wanted to make note that I would be 103 years old at the termination of this lease. Ready to vote? Commissioner Shepard?
You want me to read the motion?
Oh, yes, please.
Motion by the Port Commission to approve a modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and Seaview Boatyard North, Inc. for premises at Squalicum Harbor.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
No.
Commissioner Bell is a yes. Item J from the consent agenda.
Motion by the Port Commission to authorize Executive Director to execute an easement agreement with Aliotti Construction LLC for port property located adjacent to 1000 C Street, Bellingham, Washington, 98225.
And I only pulled this, if you guys would indulge me, just because of a couple of terms that were included in that gave me a little bit of pause, and I think it reduced the flexibility of the port long term, and I wanted to go through those with you. I'm pulling it up as we speak. And I did discuss this with both legal counsel and Shirley. I wanted to actually bring this at the end of the meeting because I wanted Shirley to have to stick around for the entire meeting. But the word perpetual and the parameters around which the easement is removed were a concern to me. And I think I can pull up where perpetual meant. It's in just before the fiscal impact is a paragraph that says the easement would be perpetual, non-exclusive, which would automatically terminate. And perpetual just means always. It just means it's going to be there forever. And my concern around perpetual and not having a defined termination parameter is that it essentially gives this easement there forever at the whim and without the port having any control over that property any longer, as long as the lease payments are being paid. And I'm thinking 40 years from now, we may want to have some flexibility with that easement, and also the parameter around ingress and egress. If there was another ingress and egress established, we need to understand that that would terminate this, and it would not be perpetual. I'm trying to be articulate as I say this. But it's mutually exclusive to have something that's perpetual and then have a termination clause. So I don't think we want a permanent easement there. If we decide that we want to buy, say, the Ebenall property down the road, or do something, 40 years from now with that property, I don't want a future port commission to have to be bound by a perpetual and permanent easement on that property. I think that we want the easement there, certainly, for the use of that property now, but I'd like to word that a little differently so that it's the easement is there, but there are parameters around which we would terminate that easement for our own purposes. Did that make sense to you all? And John, is that kind of the way I described it for you as I discussed it?
Commissioner Seth Wilson, my office, has taken the lead on this.
Right.
And
I
so
talked to Seth.
I'm going to ask him to jump in here. He's been working with Shirley on this extensively. So
I'm sorry, John, I did talk to Seth. Seth, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right.
Could I just say something real quick is that, if I may, that the action on the floor today is to authorize the executive director to execute an easement. So there is an opportunity here, Commissioner Bell and other commissioners, to further refine and better define what you have said, because I think it's worth doing for sure. And we have an opportunity to do that because we don't have an executed agreement.
So I have a question, as long as we're digging into this, for Commissioner Bell. If you were the business that needed the easement and your business plans go out 20 years or whatever, and you're going to need those easements to operate your business, I wouldn't be very comfortable with somebody saying, well, we can take them away anytime. And is that what I'm hearing we're asking for?
No, not at all. I want the easement there as long as it's necessary for him to operate the business. I also think the easement needs to be there as long as he has no other ingress or egress. But I'm looking, again, 40 years down the road where he's not the owner of the building, and we decide that we want to go in and take out the Ebenall property. If we have a permanent easement in there and we don't have the ability to manipulate that property to the best benefit of the port, but that's always going to be there as long as somebody's making a lease payment on that easement, it restricts us in the future. So I don't in any way, shape, or form want to stop this easement from going through and having it there at his pleasure and for his needs. But I don't want to bind the property forever under an easement on that building in case, because it removes our flexibility on that waterfront property.
I guess I'm having trouble with the vision of it removing our flexibility, Commissioner Bell. Can you further define that? I mean,
well,
if we've got an easement there, it's on flat property. It's still our property, and it's an easement for safety. Basically, it's for emergency vehicles. We're going to have to give one of those no matter what, because that other property is never going to go away unless we buy it, right?
So a couple things for background here that may help, commissioners. One, the property is over utilities. It's a pretty extensive utility corridor, so for us to go down or dig, any kind of a foundation there is going to be really tricky. And two, this is not an exclusive easement. So if we want to use that property for ingress and egress to another building, we have that ability. He does not have an exclusive use of this easement. He just has it. And Shirley, correct me if I said anything wrong.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, my problem is with the word perpetual. It just makes it a permanent easement on that property. And if we, let's say we go in and buy, or someone else buys that piece of property and they pay that lease, they've got that permanent easement.
So a building has a life of roughly 40 years. That building's not new by any means, but would the commission be comfortable with us putting a time frame on it such as a 40-year easement? It gets rid of the perpetual.
Yeah, either that or a provision that discusses what the exit strategy is in case we need it. But yeah, I'm with you, Bobby. I don't want to give him the uncertainty. He needs to have that easement as long as he needs it. That's not the intent here at all. It's just I don't think we need to bind a future port with something permanent. And it may not be Aliati that owns it. It may be a restaurant that doesn't need it any longer.
I don't think it matters who owns it. They're going to need that easement to get in and out with emergency vehicles, do anything. So I don't have a problem with what the word is, period. It's always going to be there. You're always going to have it. That's just the lay of the land.
Seth, I
don't think it makes any difference one way or the other, but if people are more comfortable with some other word, whatever.
What's standard? Is it standard for us to use that perpetual word in easements? when we
Actually,
do this in other places.
Seth and I talked about this at length. Seth, can you kind of give me a condensed version?
Yeah. So yes, perpetual is perpetual, and Port can and probably has in the past, certainly has given other permanent easement rights. It also can give an easement for a set period of time or with a set defined termination. This one does have a loosely defined automatic termination, which is in the event that property gets other access that makes this easement unnecessary. Now, there's no requirement for that property owner to go out and seek that easement or to seek other access, to acquire other property to allow it to have this emergency access. So, if you were to grant this as it sits, you would have to expect that easement would be there in perpetuity going forward. And of course, as a public body, you could always, if you needed that property in the future for some other purpose that this use was inconsistent with, you could always first try to renegotiate where an easement access was if you wanted to relocate it so that you could make use of that corridor for something else. Ultimately, obviously, Commissioner would always have the ability to condemn out that easement in the future if it were to grant it as a permanent easement now. So there's a lot of options before the commission to either to kind of craft it how they want, to try to further define exactly certain scenarios where the Aliani property would no longer have this easement if there is a concern for the future needs of the port under certain circumstances. There are all sorts of adjustments that could be made.
Well, I don't want to hold it up because I do think the easement is necessary. I just don't like the permanency of it. So I'm gonna take Shirley's advice, and yes, Shirley, I do listen to you. That Rob is going to have the flexibility, or the port is going to have the flexibility to word this accordingly. But I do agree that the easement needs to be there for Aliati's purposes, but something a little less stringent would be nice.
Understood, and we will work with Seth and Mr. Aliotti to finalize the agreement for Rob's review.
So we can go ahead with this item as an action item, knowing that the final agreement will come before us. Is that correct?
That's not how it's worded today, sir.
Before you.
Correct.
We'll assume that you're going to do your job and we can stay out of it.
I will check in with all three commissioners before I execute anything.
Item J.
Motion by the Port Commission to authorize Executive Director to execute an easement agreement with Aliotti Construction LLC for port property located adjacent to 1000 C Street, Bellingham, Washington, 98225.
Commissioner Shepard?
Commissioner, I would add to that, subject to the executive director's final approval. I don't want what's in the packet to be perceived as what was approved by the commission, but you should say that subject to the executive director's final approval.
Okay, subject to the Executive Director's final approval.
Thank you, Gary.
Commissioner Shepard?
I'm still a yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Unanimous. All right, it is now 5:30. We'll move on to other business, but I wanted to give anybody in the audience who had anything that they wanted to say to the commission the opportunity to do so now. Anyone wishing to speak to the commission, raise a hand or pop your picture up on the page. Hearing none, we'll move on to other business. Commissioner Shepard?
Thanks. I just have one. We've been in conversation about a tiny home shelter on Cornwall Street. And in December, we had approved that for use during the time period consistent with the public health emergency. And in our conversations with the potential provider, it's been challenging for them to make the investment in ramping up all the infrastructure needed and to feel like they have sufficient time to get residents into those tiny homes and really succeed in their mission of trying to not keep people in tiny homes, but to transition them out into permanent housing. And the feedback we've received is that they need a little bit longer security of knowing that they could utilize the property. So I'd like to propose that we give them a year from whenever they are able to begin commencement of occupancy to give them some of that security and to allow that transition of individuals through their system and into permanent housing.
Commissioners, the only thing I would add to that is I'm going to be meeting with the mayor of Bellingham this week to talk about the city's role in this. We're going to need their help on the utilities. We're going to need their help on the Laurel Street right-of-way, which they control. We would like to include that right-of-way as part of this this effort.
I have a question of clarity, Michael. Or Commissioner Shepherd, can you clarify for me the time frame? So I believe you said a year from the time they can, was it permits you said?
Oh, I said a year from when they start occupancy. So when they actually have people in there utilizing the property.
The permitting and the construction project process on this should be pretty quick, commissioners. It's a pretty simple process. Homes Now has it down. Doug Gustafson has a team of people that'll come in. So I don't suspect we're dealing with years long of permitting and construction. We're talking more like 30, 60 days.
So do we have a sunset on anything as to, I mean, if they don't do something here and they don't do something here and they don't do something here, pretty soon we're a year out, and then their year starts at that year out. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't want this to happen, Commissioner Shepherd. I just want to make sure that we don't have one of these things that keeps rolling down the road, and then we're down the road a year and a half, and oh gee, we've got something to do with this stuff in a year, but they're going to be, I mean, you understand what I'm saying? I don't see the.
Yeah.
And we can account for that, commissioners. We can certainly put something in the agreement between Homes Now and the port that gives them a date that they have to have permits and start construction. And if they don't, then they forfeit the property.
I mean, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on, but I also don't want to have us pressured on the other end too much with an open-ended program. So if we can figure that out to where we're not open-ended out to 2-3 years, whatever it ends up at, because I believe when we talked about this, we had a time frame, and I understand how things go and it takes longer to do stuff, but I also have to think about the public interest on the other end. That if and for when, who knows, the property was needed or something that we're not 3 years down the road before we can get to it. So that's my only concern. Other than that, what you asked for, Michael, I'm fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly my intention to make this used as soon as possible. I think we approved it, and I've been frustrated that it hasn't been utilized because we continue to have challenge of people being homeless. And I appreciate that Rob has kind of decided that we could either keep waiting or we could just take this under our own devices. And so Rob's really, I think, stepped up a lot and helped these negotiations along and gotten us to a point where we're pretty close to being able to move forward.
Well, I spent some time with Doug, and I'm actually going to take a tour tomorrow morning of his village, and I'm surprised at how philosophically aligned Doug and I are on an approach. This is a perfect fit and a perfect solution. I'm particularly struck by the way he utilizes people and lifts them up instead of just giving handouts. He's actually rebuilding lives in the process. I'm a big fan, and I'm fully supportive of your motion, Michael, and I've got nothing else to add. Unless you guys want to come tour with me at morning, 8 o'clock.
I have already toured myself, and I encourage anyone else to. He's made this available to any elected official and members of the public to see the Swift Haven at Jerry Field and see the one in Fairhaven. They're clean, they're well run, they're quiet, and just what you said, Commissioner Bell, they have the residents taking a lot of ownership for the operation of the site, which not only saves a lot of money, but gives people something valuable to do with their time.
Well, and just a personal note, I've seen his approach work, and this may be the most valuable thing we do on the port because we are actually going to save some lives. And every day a life can be saved or some sobriety can be achieved by somebody who's an addict is a day gained. And time is the most precious thing we have. So I am supportive of this, and I would, if you made that a motion.
I don't believe that was a motion, Commission. Was it a motion?
It was a motion.
Sorry.
Would you like to repeat it so we can vote on it?
Sure. I would like to motion that we extend the timeline for utilization of the Cornwall site for a year from the commencement of operation.
I will second that motion. Commissioner Briscoe?
Can we add with there's got to be a sunset at some point. I don't want to do an open-ended thing.
We'll put a parameters, and again, commissioners, this has to come back to you for approval. I don't have the authority to do this on my own with just this motion. It'd have to be a little more detailed agreement. So we'll be coming back to you with a written agreement between us and Homes Now, and Commissioner Briscoe, I'll assure you that we will put something in there that guarantees a construction start and completion date.
Very good, and so we can go ahead then. I'm comfortable with that.
Yes. Commissioner Shepard's a yes, and I would assume.
Yes.
Commissioner
Yes.
Bell.
I second the motion, and yes.
And Commissioner Bell is a yes. All three yeses. Any other business, Commissioner Shepard?
That is it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Briscoe?
You go ahead. I'm still thinking.
That's my trick.
Well, I pulled it on you.
I've got three if you want more time.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Some kudos are deserving for our Economic Development Department. Don Goldberg specifically, they helped land the Family Care Network unit up in Blaine. We're all aware that Blaine has been without doctors for a number of years. They've been working hard on this. An email came through from Michael Jones, the city manager, and couldn't say enough good things about Don, which I know is hard to do, but he did. And Don's team did a great job to land the doctors in Blaine. So thank you guys on Economic Development for working on that, and the Blaine community thanks you. The other one, this is gonna be a little more tricky, is 4th of July. We're planning on doing some fireworks. And I know this may be a little bit controversial on COVID, but we're hoping to do fireworks and be able to socially distance. We think the fireworks will be viewable from large portions of Bellingham. Folks can spread out and stay 6 to 10 feet apart on sidewalks and in parking lots. We're not going to have an event down on the waterfront. It won't be the usual bands and beer garden and games. That will not be occurring. So we're going to encourage folks not to come down to Zwanich Park. We'll be limiting the number of cars that come into that area. The same goes for the Pump Track waterfront area and other port properties. We'll be making sure that people stay distanced, wear masks, and that we don't overcrowd these things. But again, that's the current plan. I think Tiffany's on if we have some questions or if she wants to add anything onto that.
How many people can we have?
9,000 between all port properties, is that right?
My understanding currently.
9,000 for all of them? Or can we pack 9,000 people into Zwanich?
No, you can't
No.
pack 9 into Zwanich. Nice try.
Well, you could.
I'm not sure you could. That's a lot.
I'd pay to see that.
Well, this came up today at the small cities meeting, and it seems that most of the other small cities are also moving ahead with fireworks for the 4th of July. Blaine's planning to have their street fair. No one's planning to do the same level of parades. So I think we're trying to be smart, but still give people an opportunity to celebrate. And both Mayor Fleetwood expressed his support for having the fireworks in Bellingham as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I didn't realize that. Thank you.
Yeah, the one who seemed to be most concerned about this was Guy Otagracio from the chamber, and I was surprised at his hesitancy, but
Well, they're going to be partners with us in this, so he's going to take probably as much heat as you guys if this goes south. But we're going to work hard to make sure it doesn't.
Now, if there's heat, just bring it, because I'm in favor of this entirely.
Yeah, bring the heat on. Won't bother me at all. It's always hot in the kitchen.
Just keep getting those vaccines, people.
Yep, keep getting vaccinated. And I never like to invite the heat, but thank you, commissioners.
Yeah, Tiffany, anything we can do to help, let us know.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And we're going to do our best to make sure we do it safely for the community, but give them something that they can do outside.
Yeah, I'm a fan,
Thanks.
so we'll be promoting it.
Okay, and then my last
important
one.
Day. Pretty important day, especially for what this country's been going through, this county's been going through. It's a pretty important day to be able to go out and celebrate your independence. I mean, it is really a big deal for a lot of people. A lot of people think it's, you know, ho, 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 but for a lot of people, it's, you know, it's who we are. So,
Ho,
you
ho,
know,
ho is Christmas.
Yeah, we've not been able to be who we are for quite some time now. So it's about time we got started again.
Thanks, Commissioner Briscoe.
Thank you, commissioners. My last one, and this one's going to be a little hard for me. I've relied on this individual probably more so than any other individual in the port. She's got a 35-year history here at the Port of Bellingham, but as you're aware, this is Shirley McPheron's last commission meeting with us. This is her last week at the port before she goes off into a well-deserved retirement. She'll be leaving sometime next week, but I was just hoping maybe the commission could acknowledge her just absolutely incredible work and contributions to our community.
Not only are we going to acknowledge her, we're going to Shanghai her for another 5 years. How's that? Shirley.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So good grief, boss. You just brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for those kind words. I mean, really, it's just been amazing. I don't have a prepared speech, but what I do want to say, because there's a few important things that I have to tell people, but I was just going to tell them when I was alone with them. But I want everyone to know that I leave this organization with enormous gratitude. This has been an incredible 35-year career for me. This commission has been amazing to work with. You ask hard questions, which tick me off on a regular basis, but you still ask these hard questions. You represent our community in a way that I am so proud of. And I thank you for that. You are so good together. To my boss, who has pushed me in a way that no one has pushed me to be really good at this job. And it was important to me to be good at this job. And I'll tell you, when Rob was irritated with me, which I only remember twice, I was really upset by it because I really cared about what he thought of my work. And I mean that from the heart. To my amazing staff, oh my God, I will miss you so much. You are amazing people. You have made me shine, and you have made this organization shine in a way that I will never forget. To all of my coworkers, thank you so much for your support. You have been incredible to work with, and I have adored working with all of you. But most of all, thank you so much for the memories. I will hold them dear for the rest of my life, and I will wave the flag of this organization forever. Thank you.
Any of you commissioners?
Shirley, as your senior commissioner, been working with you for 6 years, and it's been a pleasure. I've been a thorn in your side. You've been a thorn in my side. But together we figured it all out.
We did.
So when I need advice, I'll be calling. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Shepard?
Well, Shirley, I wish you the best in retirement. You have, I think we were talking earlier, and just struck me that that's what anyone can hope for when retiring. I hope to be able to say those same things, that I had a fulfilling career in what I did, and I feel proud of the organization and that I've left it in a better place than when I started. So congratulations to you on such achievement, and we will certainly miss you. You're that steady force that we always rely on, and I'm going to have to get used to relying on someone else, but we have really appreciated all your wisdom and expertise here, and I wish you the best in your next chapter.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Thank you very much.
Oh, here we go. No tears. If I were going to go into battle, you are the general I would want to go to battle with. You have been an incredible example. You have been a true leader. You have been hard as nails, and you have been soft as silk. You know exactly when to pull the lever and when to release it. Your judgment and your wisdom are absolutely amazing. So, General, I want to thank you for the times that you've actually told me to go to hell, and I looked forward to the trip, because you have a way of doing that. I want to thank you for your grace, for your smile. I'm going to forever remember your laugh, forever. And last but not least, I know that as we discuss and as people call us around negotiations, if I pick up the phone and they say, hey, Ken, I want to talk to you about Shirley, all I knew is that I had to sit back and watch, because you were doing your job. And it was always amazing, and it was always in the port's best interest. Always. You're going to be a tough one to replace. I don't think it's possible. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the example that you've set. And thank you for your service.
Commissioner Bell, thank you so much for those kind words. I will miss you all. Just want to say that one more time. I will miss you all.
Thank you, General.
So when it's safe to do so, we will have a retirement party for General McFerrin.
Any other business?
That's all I have.
Here.
And it'll be a port, and we'll have 9,000 people on Zwanich Park waiting for you with fireworks. That's the end of this meeting, unless anyone has anything else.
I have one more thing to add. Has to do with a newly appointed director, our director of marinas. I don't know how many thousands of phone calls I've fielded over the 6 years I've been a commissioner, but it's been a lot. And 9 times out of 10, there's an issue to resolve. I've received a couple of phone calls since our new marina director, Tiffany DeSimone, has been in office. And it was very heartfelt to have 2 phone calls that weren't about a problem. They were about people who had nothing good to say about Tiffany and her new job. They said, one person said, and I quote, "It was like a breath of fresh air talking to that new director of marinas. I didn't think something could be resolved so easily and kindly." So Tiffany, you're off to a very good start. I knew you would be. Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Tiffany, in 35 years, we'll be talking to you like we're talking to Shirley.
Well, I hope I can, I hope I've absorbed all of Shirley's wisdom in the last 2 years that I've reported to her, and can carry that forward. Thank you.
When we say Shirley touched every aspect of the port, not everyone knows this, but Tiffany's been reporting to Shirley for the last several years, and Shirley has really set Tiffany up for success. So just another great contribution by Shirley to the Port of Bellingham.
With that,
Here. That's all I have. Thank you.
the Port Commission meeting for Tuesday, April 20th is now over. Meeting adjourned.